Resuming debate, the honourable member for Scarborough Rouge Park.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Chair. I think it's appropriate that I begin today by acknowledging that we're gathered here on the traditional lands of the Algonquin people, and also to first thank the Minister and his team for the remarkable work that he has done as Minister since he took office in January of 2016. This is a very difficult conversation for me to listen to, Mr. Chair. It's very difficult because I've heard this debate before, and in fact I've been in the brunt of it for several years, and I would even argue that I'm here because I wanted to respond to this debate. And I want to just put myself in context. On August 31st of 1983, my family took a plane from Ireland and landed here at Montreal's Mirabel Airport because we were unable to go to Sri Lanka, where my family is originally from. And I would assume that based on the discussion that we are hearing today, that too would be irregular, illegal, and so on. So I do reflect on this because people don't do things as refugees. People don't take extraordinary risk just because they want to. They do it because they have to. And as I hear the minister speak and respond to, frankly, some ridiculous questions that really it should be shameful, because I think as members of parliament we have an obligation to understand what the law is and what our process is and how our government works. And if we're simply unable to understand the difference between IRCC and IRB, we should probably need to take some lessons, or the party needs to do some extra classes so that members actually understand how our process works. As I sat here, I heard heckling. I heard a number of members across the aisle say they're jumping the queue. They're illegals. I don't know if they said terrorists today, but I know they did at one point. And I take you back to 2009 and 2010 in Canada. I take you back to Vancouver in October of 2009, when the Ocean Lady arrived with 76 Tamil refugees. And the initial outrage from the government at that time, the Harper government at that time, was that these were terrorists. These were queue jumpers. These were illegals. And again, a year later, we saw in Esquimalt, in Victoria, British Columbia, as a boatload of asylum seekers, refugees, who braved the Pacific, who took extraordinary risk, who came ashore, and the weeks leading up to it, the outrageous attacks on refugees, the outrageous attacks on people who are fleeing persecution. And they set the stage so that as people got off that boat, they were immediately deemed to be illegals. And I invite my colleagues here to look at the pictures that initially came out as the 6-year-old and the baby and families got off who essentially were targeted and named as terrorists. A 6-year-old. And that is the type of conversation we're having here today. Let's have an adult conversation about this. There are two systems in place. There's a system that looks at immigration. That is the IRCC. That is a system that ensures that people who are coming to Canada as family sponsors of family members, who come here as investors, who come here in their student visas, and all those things are administered. They're vetted, they're screened, their applications processed. That is one stream. The other stream is a refugee stream, the stream of that comprised of asylum seekers. And they go to what's called the Immigration Refugee Board. The IRB is an independent body that is charged with making the decision, adjudicate actual decisions on if someone meets the criteria of a refugee. And that is the system we have. It's two independent systems. They're not, there's a little bit of overlap, but for the most part, they're two independent systems. So for us to stand here and first of all complicate the two, look at one over the other and say they're the same, I think is ridiculous. But it's even more rich when we say that we're creating a queue. Because in 2011, and many people may recall, one of the knee-jerk responses of the Harper government to the boats that came was to essentially create new law that set new timelines. So there are people who are in the actual queue to be heard under the Immigration and Refugee Board went to the back of the line. Close to 7,000 applicants, in fact. And they were called legacy cases. And this is one of the legacies of the previous Harper government, is those cases. The close to 7,000 cases that existed at the time. And thankfully, our minister and his department, since taking office, our government has addressed this to the point where, by the end of this year, all those backlogged applications would be processed. They would be heard and they would be adjudicated. Because we have a very strong and independent body called the Immigration and Refugee Board, which is an envy of the world. It's been constantly underfunded under the previous government. It has lacked credible adjudicators. But now it stands as a beacon of hope around the world for actual refugee protection and adjudication. So we should be very, very proud of that. But coming back to the conversation here. So if you look at the legacy cases, I've been working with people on the MV Sunsea and Ocean Lady now for a number of years. And in fact, I still am monitoring many of the cases that are going through the system. And one thing that's very clear to me is the previous government's complete failure, the Harper government's complete failure to look at things in context. And that is the history that we hear today. That is the history that the questions point to. Do you want to choose refugees? Do you want to choose queue jumpers over family sponsorship, over family members of living caregivers, or Ukrainian refugees? We can't have this dichotomies. We can do both. And in Canada, what's very important for us, I think, as a government and as a people in 2018 is to understand what's happening around the world. There's 65 million displaced persons around the world. 65 million. 22.5 million in refugees. The country like Bangladesh took in 680,000 people in the last 9 months alone. And that is a grander context of refugees. And as a country, we have done our part. We are doing our part. But of course, like other countries, we too need to do more. So with that, Madam Chair, I'd like to ask several questions of my colleagues here from IRCC. First, I'd like to ask the Minister to clarify if migration through non-ports of entry has had any impacts on wait times in other immigration categories, and are asylum seekers jumping the refugee queue, as some on the other side suggest?